Hello and welcome to High Road Podcast, Episode 3. My name's Zach, this is Merrick, and that's Colton.
What's up, everybody?
Hello, beautiful.
On this week's episode, we're introducing a new segment called Band Breakdown.
Ooh.
It's where we take a deep dive into a band's history and discography and tell you guys all about them. In this week's episode, we're going over Pink Floyd. But first, let's hear about some local events going on.
Yeah, so Riverfront or Legacy at the Riverfront recently just took over the Warrior on the River, and they're starting to do shows starting February 8th. But February 10th, 96 Nation is presenting a show called Love, Sex, and Candy. Doors are at 8 p.m., and they have Copyright Claim, Kanice, Chef Will, and tonight's special in Soul Candy. So February 10th at Legacy at the Riverfront. Go check that show out. It's their first show with their new PA system.
And they got a whole new owner and everything for
Yep.
that, right? It used to be the Warrior on the River.
Yeah, exactly. Used to
Okay.
be the Legacy at the Riverfront.
And you said 96 Nation?
Yeah, 96 Nation is putting on the first show.
I've been seeing that. What are they?
96 Nation used to be Muse. So it used to be this promotion company that used to put on a bunch of shows in Tallahassee, where they would put on a bunch of shows like from college bands and stuff like that, and got taken over by 96 Nation. So it's kind of like a spin-off of Muse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Also, Riverfront Legacy is doing some cool stuff that's not music related, but also just fun to do. Starting February 8th, every Thursday, they're going to have Ladies' Night and line dancing, which that'd be fun. Wednesdays, they're going to be having an open jam inside. And then outside, they're going to be doing cornhole tournaments.
Cornhole's always
And
fun.
every Friday and Saturday, they're going to have karaoke on the pub stage inside.
Yeah,
So-
you know I'm going to be there for
Oh, yeah,
that cornhole
definitely. Yeah.
and that karaoke.
This
and
man's
they're-
an absolute menace in cornhole.
I love it.
They're starting to talk about as well something called Sunday Fun Day, but they haven't really released any information about it. So we'll have to keep in tune to see what's going
we'll
on.
keep
with
tabs
that.
on that one for sure.
See what's fun about it, huh?
That's really what concerts and live events that are going on in Tallahassee this week.
Not a whole lot going on. You guys have a show. Our Final Feud has a show on the.
Yeah, we have a show on the 9th, but it's in Fort Walton.
It's in Fort Walton,
Yeah.
so any viewers
Downtown Music Hall.
near Fort Walton, there you go. What time is it at?
The show is going to be starting at 7.
There you go.
Yeah,
You're in
and
the
we go
area,
on. We go on first.
Go check it out, and if you mention High Road Podcast, maybe you can get a discount on merch. I'm not gonna say anything. Maybe a free wristband.
Maybe a free sticker.
Maybe a free sticker.
We'll get there.
Yeah, calling them out. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into this new segment. So band breakdown, like I said, we're gonna take a deep dive into a different band each time, but we're gonna focus on Pink Floyd this week. And I think at that, let me send it off to you there.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I did my research for today.
This man has pages of
so
research.
If we're going to talk about Pink Floyd, I think it's very appropriate we start at the beginning, especially we're talking about the history.
Yeah.
So this takes us all the way back to fall 1963 in London.
That was a good year.
Yeah, it was, man. I'm sure you remember everything about that
Oh,
year.
definitely, man. You know.
But
remember those
two
days.
gentlemen by the name of Nick Mason and Roger Waters meet at the University of Westminster.
Westminster.
They were architects or engineers, something like that.
Yeah, they were something like that. They were in
They weren't
school.
musicians yet.
Well,
That's how it usually starts.
Well,
Right.
they may have been playing music, but they weren't Pink Floyd yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so eventually they formed a band. The original name for this band was Sigma 6.
Oh, wait a minute.
Sigma 6.
Sigma 6.
What frat were they in?
I don't know.
Was it Sigma?
I couldn't find that information.
So what?
Dude, that honestly sounds like 3 frat guys get together.
So you got
Right.
three frat guys.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
that just
And
sounds
each
like a
frat
college
guy-
band.
Oh, yeah.
Each frat guy has 2 eyeballs, and so that's 6 right there, right? Sigma 6. Is that where they got it from?
That's, you know what? That's probably
It's-
hammer on the nail, dude. You probably nailed it. Honestly.
6
But,
eyeballs between them.
it didn't stop there though. Then they moved on to the name Megadeths.
Megadeth.
And that's
Which
well
is-
before.
That is well before Megadeth.
well before, and they definitely weren't making any type of hardcore music like
Darn
that.
it.
So wait a minute.
That's kinda
Does that
funny.
mean Dave Mustaine stole Megadeth?
I can neither confirm nor deny that information.
We don't
I
know.
Well, I won't say stole. He was
Dave
inspired.
Mustaine.
He borrowed
Did
it.
you take that from Pink Floyd?
Yeah, leave a
He
comment.
he was
Dave.
inspired. Yeah, I know. I saw Dave in our last video's comments. Let us know.
Well, eventually, the guys ended up settling on the band name The Tease Set.
That's-
Okay,
ooh.
and that stuck with them.
That's pretty.
All right.
I like it.
So
Does
this-
that have to do with anything about the Boston Tea Party? Wait, no.
I don't know. I don't know.
They were British.
It didn't say.
They were.
It didn't say. But okay, so this is going into the history of the Tea Set. Okay, so the Tea Set, this consisted of 5 band members. That was Roger Waters on lead guitar, Nick Mason on the drums. You had Keith Noble, Clive Metcalf, and then you had Richard Wright on the keyboard.
Is that a 5-piece?
Little
5 or
piece,
6?
That's 5.
5-piece. So
Yes.
2 guitarists, bass,
drums.
drums, and vocals.
Yeah, it didn't give me information on Keith Noble or Clive Metcalf about which instrument they played, but
Now
it
the-
was a guitarist and a bass guitarist.
Was right.
Okay.
Excuse me. Was right. Keys from the beginning.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
He was on the keyboard from the beginning. Okay, so what the band did is they were a cover band. They did R&B covers at local events.
When you say R&B, you're talking about the '60s. What kind of R&B do they have in the '60s? I was curious about that because I was reading about them doing R&B covers earlier today, and when I think R&B, I think like what
I think the
Busy
main,
music.
102.3. You know.
I think their main influence was just a lot of blues inspired play.
Okay.
They were more so a blues band because they did do their own stuff, but majority of the time they were doing R&B covers, so soul music, blues inspired type music. That's mainly what they were focusing on.
And they were probably what in early 20s at this time.
Yeah, they were early
Fresh-
20s.
fresh into college.
Freshies.
Early 20s. So eventually, Noble and Metcalf ended up leaving the band. So then they bring in this guy. His name's Bob Close. He joins the band as the lead guitarist, which inevitably moves Waters over to the bass guitar because
so
they
he was
needed a
like-
bassist.
So he was like, "You are going to play bass now."
I think it was one of those where he kind of came in and he kind of flowed very well.
Well, he was a guitarist, right?
Waters?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
He
usually-
was the lead guitarist.
Usually,
of the band.
guitarists can pick up bass pretty well.
Bass
Yeah,
is super easy.
that, and I think he came
didn't
in.
say that.
I think maybe Close came in, maybe had a little bit more experience or something.
Yeah.
And he was like, you know what? You got that. I can pick this up.
Okay.
So that's where we're going with that. Anyway, and then they bring this other guy on. His name's Chris Dennis. He joins the band as the lead singer. So now they actually have a singer.
Yeah.
to sing songs.
This is when they started making original music, though, right?
This is when they got in to start making their own music.
Okay.
Yeah. But it doesn't stop there. They actually added another member of the band. This is a childhood friend of Waters, and his name is Sid Barrett.
Ooh,
Okay.
Sid Barrett.
Sid
Barrett,
Barrett.
yeah.
Sid Barrett
Rest in peace.
joins this band as the other guitarist. So he was the rhythm guitar. Okay, that's when he joined. Well, in December of 1964, they recorded for the first time in a studio that one of Wright's friends let them use. So he's just like, hey, I got a studio, y'all can use it. And they
That's-
recorded for the first time ever.
That's awesome that they got to record in a studio for probably completely free.
That reminds me of
That's awesome.
That reminds me of this one band I know. I think one of the friends of the lead singer let them film a music video in his basement and even filmed it for him for free.
Who are you talking about?
I don't know, some no-name band, Our Final Feud or something.
Ow.
Anyways, just kidding.
Major
Jingle
shade.
Bells cover.
Major
Major
shade.
shade. I can feel the tension between these two right now.
No. We're plugging Our Final Feud, of course, but Jingle Bells metal cover, mentioned it last week. Go check it out. Sorry about that.
Interesting topic. Anyway, so going into 1965, Dennis ended up leaving the band because he was actually in the Royal Air Force, and he ended up being stationed elsewhere. So
I believe it was
unfortunately,
Bahrain.
Bahrain, something like that. Yeah,
I'm not
he
familiar
ended
with
up basically he had to move far away and he had to leave the band.
That sucks. And
Unfortunately.
what was he again?
He was the lead singer.
He was the lead singer. Dang,
So-
so they didn't have a singer again.
Right. So, but once he left, Barrett decided to step up, and he became the new lead singer.
So
while
was he-
also playing guitar.
So he was playing guitar
Yes.
and lead singing.
But
Okay.
he was playing rhythm guitar, and he was lead singing.
Before the first lead singer left, was Barrett already like heavily influential with the lyric writing, or did he not start doing that until?
No, it was still kind of like a mutual, like all together thing. Everybody kind of wrote the music. They didn't write much. They didn't have a whole lot of their own material.
So they did
were,
a lot of covers.
They were still doing covers at this point.
Okay.
Okay. They only recorded for the first time. You know, that one time I just said.
Yeah.
Actually, they recorded covers, and they ended up. I think they did one original piece, but that's about as all they. That's
Gotta
about
start
as all they
somewhere,
did,
man.
you know? So, after he stepped up and became the new lead singer, they started playing a lot more shows. They were playing almost every single night at this place called the Countdown Club. So get this, they would perform 3 90-minute sets
Oh my gosh.
nightly.
Nightly?
Back to back, or
Yes.
Were they paid?
No.
free
So
beer?
it was
They
all
were doing
free.
this for free. Yes.
3
exposure,
90-minute
man.
shows.
You got to put the work in.
That's dedication, my friends.
How do you even get 90
You don't
minutes
just
worth of
get
material?
signed. You don't just get that check. You put that work in,
Oh yeah.
and look at them now.
All right. So yeah, at this time, obviously these longer sets, their songs started to become longer, and they actually started to experiment a little more with their sound and trying out different things. Okay, so it's starting to build.
Yeah.
Get more into the prog rock almost.
Almost.
Yeah,
So-
they got into prog rock quite a bit.
for sure. So unfortunately, there was a lot of pressure on Close's head. So that's the lead guitarist at the time. He was getting pressure and hammered from his family and his girlfriend at the time to basically you're not really doing anything with your life. You need to do something.
Basically, it was like you either need to do this or you need to do this.
Yeah.
I
So
feel like everyone's been there at one point or another.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, Close decided to leave the band to focus more so on his studies for school because these guys they were all
They're
still in college.
Yeah.
They're all still in
Respect.
college at this point. So
You got to
yeah,
think about your future.
exactly. So that's what he did. So after he leaves,
Biggest regret.
Barrett steps up and becomes the lead guitarist now. So now he's singing and he's the lead guitarist for the band.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
So he's playing lead and singing.
Yep.
That's not easy.
That is not easy.
No, because you have to figure out your melodies for your vocals, but also figure out the melody for the lead.
That is a very
Yeah.
complicated job.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I can't play my acoustic guitar and sing.
I couldn't
really.
play lead and sing
right
at the
now,
same
so-
time. There's no way.
Mad props to him.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, they ended up going through a bunch of different band name changes. They couldn't really settle on one, but then they finally chose the name Pink Floyd. Okay.
What? How did they choose it?
All right.
So
Iconic
it's
name.
funny that you asked that. I actually have that information here, but I believe you already knew this information, Zach. Did you wanna share that?
Pink Floyd. Yeah. So it was. If I'm not mistaken, was it Roger Waters' favorite?
No, it was
Was it Sid's?
Barrett's.
Okay,
It was
so
Sid
yeah,
Barrett's.
Sid Barrett's favorite like blues musicians. They picked it. He had a collection of vinyls, and he picked his 2 favorite ones, and it was Pink Anderson
Pink Anderson
and Floyd
Council.
Council.
Pink Anderson and Floyd Council
So
were
they took the 2 first names.
that was his 2 favorite blues players.
Okay.
And
That's so crazy.
they
that
took their
picked-
first names.
They picked 2 blues
And-
players and went a completely different direction.
True, it's blues inspired, but yes,
Yes.
true.
I mean, all music is blues inspired.
Fair enough.
For the most part, yeah.
Especially during
So-
that time.
But I
Mm-hmm.
did read that they first they toyed with the idea of Anderson Council, and they all kind of came to the consensus that sounds kind of like a part of Parliament, and that wasn't a really good representation of what they were. So Pink Floyd.
I don't think I would listen to a band called the Anderson Council.
sounds like a. I don't even want to get into it.
So after that, they started playing a lot more gigs, and this is all throughout 1966. So this is 3 years after the original band was created and what it is now. they finally started getting paid for these gigs. Okay,
Paid
they finally started
gigs.
making money off of these
Whoop,
gigs. What everybody considered their sound, they had a mixed sound. You had rock, blues, and they also inquired music hall, which is basically almost like a choir,
Yeah.
not like a choir, like orchestral.
And this was
sound.
This was like a year into them first coming about, right? 'Cause
Yes.
most bands don't find their sound for like
At least an album or two.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I mean, you're gonna have
Your experimental
rock, blues,
phases.
exactly.
I'd consider this whole time period where they're at now, this is their experimental period. So this is
Okay.
where they're trying out
It's their adolescence.
different sounds. They're trying out different amps, different effects, different volumes and stuff, because they actually had an interview on BBC, and the guy interviewing them was super rude, just because
I
he
saw
didn't
this.
like their music, so he was being super rude to them and being like, "Why do you guys find it necessary
Why is
to
it so
play
loud?"
so loud?" And Waters ended up responding. He was very cool about it. He was just like, "Well, I don't think our music's too loud. Like we like it."
yeah.
What did he say? He said, "We didn't grow up on strings like you did," or something.
Yeah,
like that.
he said something along the line. He made a little insult
That's
towards
how
the guy,
you know
but in
you.
a nice
That's how
way.
you know you're making it when you start to have haters.
Exactly. So that was
To all
their
you
sound.
haters out there, thank you.
But a mix of that sound actually ended up becoming what we know today as psychedelic rock. So they basically created psychedelic rock, which can be an argument because people can argue that the Beatles did that,
Yeah,
or
I would say
even
so.
people before them, which I could agree with that.
I could agree. Yeah.
But these guys really
Grateful
took
Dead.
these guys took it
They
to the
weren't
next
before,
level.
But,
Pink Floyd took this to the next level, right?
around that
So there's that. Now, what inspired the music that was being created was heavily influenced by LSD.
oh yeah.
LSD,
Dude, they're in
hence-
this- they're
hence
in the
name-
60s. That was-
hence the
that
name
was-
psychedelic rock. Barrett, in particular, was the one who was inspired by the LSD because all the other bandmates, they were pretty clean. They weren't really.
They probably smoked a little chooch every now and then.
Probably, but they were they were
we
pretty
go any
adamant
further-
about being away from that stuff.
Real quick, before if anybody doesn't know, LSD is a hallucinogenic drug, and
If you look at our backdrop,
yeah,
that's what things look like.
it alters your perception a lot, and some would argue that it helps with the musical process, makes you more creative. Some would argue that it dumbs you down. So
I don't know if I could write music on LSD.
everybody's different. Jimi Hendrix played live shows with LSD in his headband, so everybody's different. But yeah,
mean,
it's a pretty intense hallucinogenic, and this man was rocking this stuff daily.
Yes, he was very adamant about taking LSD. Now, what actually inspired his lyric writing was an author. Her name was Lewis Carroll. She influenced Barrett's lyric writing a lot. So a lot of the lyrics he's come up with
What kind of
early on
writer
stuff.
was?
I'm not.
I couldn't really find too much on it.
Yeah, I didn't really read up a whole lot into her, per se. But just know that Pink Floyd's very early stuff was heavily influenced by her, as far as the lyrics go. But one night, these two gentlemen, Andrew King and Peter Jenner, saw the band play at the Marquee, and they asked to become their managers, which they did.
Wow, that's a pretty easy.
So they
That's how
attained.
that's how easy that is.
That's how it happens, man. That's how it happens. Haven't you seen any movie ever about a rock band? That's how it happens. You just
No.
get seen and they come up and they're like, "We want to be your manager."
Yeah. They're
But-
like, "Do you guys have a manager?" No.
We got
Do you guys want one?
You don't want one. We got two.
So those managers went out and found them a booking agent. That booking agent's name was Brian Morrison. He was actually the owner of the UFO Club, which you may have heard of.
Oh, yeah.
I've
Very
heard of
popular
I've
club
heard
in
of Brian
London.
Morrison because I think he used to book like for everybody.
He was a
Yeah,
big name
sure,
booker
yeah.
back then, especially in the music scene in the UK.
Led
it was
Zeppelin
it
and
was
the Beatles.
blowing up around
Yeah.
this time. So at first, all their experimental music that they were doing at these shows was not really received very well. Okay, people didn't really know how it sounded. They were like,
Groundbreaking stuff
This isn't
usually isn't.
music." Okay, and this is around the time where, they had that interview with BBC and the guys throwing shade
Yeah.
at them. Okay, so that's that time. Well, eventually, by the end of the year, they started gaining attraction from record labels. And Joe Boyd got them a studio session. Joe Boyd was a club owner at the time. at a place called Sound Techniques.
It's crazy that all these club owners are like in with record labels back in the day.
That was the thing back then, man.
Because like nowadays, club owners don't have ties.
You
with
got to
record
get ties with
labels or anything.
iTunes, YouTube Music,
Yeah,
Spotify. It's all corporate. You know, I don't like. Yeah.
Does anybody know the record company that signed them?
Wasn't it EMI Columbia?
You are correct, my friend. It was EMI. EMI actually signed the band for a £5,000 advance, which in today's money is £100,000.
That's not that big of a record
I was
deal.
gonna say, still seems pretty low. You know,
Because I mean, nowadays people are getting signed to $1 million
How many
360 contracts. You know,
how many
Yeah.
years or 1 year?
It didn't say how many years. It just that's when they were signed. But March 10th, 1967, Pink Floyd's first official single is released. The name of that single is called Arnold Lane. It's funny. This song has a really weird meaning behind it. At least at the time, it was really weird. The meaning behind this song is this man, Arnold Lane, would steal women's clothing off of a clothesline and then wear it.
Fair enough.
And then that was the whole message of the song.
that was back when like cross-dressing and stuff like that was like seen as not good.
Taboo.
Yeah, so
it
I
was
think- I
different
think
times back then,
It
man.
seems like Pink Floyd like wrote that song to be like, listen, this is okay.
I think
It's okay
they
to
were
steal women's clothing.
I think they were
and wear it.
against
Steal it.
stick it to the man.
They were
From your-
against it, yeah.
Steal it from your neighbor's clothesline, everyone.
Well, well, the reason why the meaning behind that song is important is because radio stations were banning the song. They didn't want to play that song over the radio
They're
because
just
Yeah,
soft.
they
because
were
of the
like-
meaning. Yeah.
Exactly. They were like, this is not it. But even though they were banning it from radio stations, the song still became a huge hit in the UK. Blew up. Everybody was loving this song.
Yeah, because either if it's not playing on the radio stations, you're still gonna buy the record and still be able to hear it.
It was a
Exactly.
bop.
So let's fast forward a couple months. We go to June 16th of that same year. EMI Columbia releases the band's second single, and this title was See Emily Play, which ended up being an even bigger hit than the song before that, Arnold Lane. Now, the band was recording their first album with a producer by the name of Norman Smith, who actually ended up being the band's producer for many years. He ended up being the band's producer for, I think, about like 7 or 8 years.
I mean, because if you find
something like that.
if you find a producer or somebody that's really
If they
good
work,
at
they work.
engineering, I mean,
Yeah.
especially
think about like Rick Rubin, you know?
yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Exactly. They'll drink to that. So, we fast forward
Hit us up, Rick.
to the beginning of the following year. Okay, so now we're in April 5th of 1967. EMI Columbia releases the first official studio album for Pink Floyd, titled The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Now, this is a huge hit.
It's a cool name for an
Yep.
album.
Capitol Records, back over here in the States, actually ended up picking up their records as well, and they released their first couple records.
Oh, nice. So they were
over here in the
partnering
States.
with the States.
Yes,
Yeah.
they were. So they had a couple different deals.
Capitol Records is a big, big name, especially back then. In the U.S., like
Who'd they have on there?
everybody.
A lot of people.
That was back in
I-
that
I-
day.
I
Literally
couldn't name 'em.
everybody.
I couldn't name anybody right now because I didn't specifically look up that.
We're trying to
But-
do Pink
but
Floyd.
Capitol Records is a huge
Oh,
deal.
yeah.
We'll do Capitol Records in the corporate breakdown segment.
Right. So now that the music was touching the States and starting to grow popular here, that called for shows in the U.S. But before the band even got a chance to appear at any shows in the U.S., their manager actually ended up canceling their appearances because Barrett had a mental breakdown. This was from the usage of his
Daily
substance abuse.
LSD.
Yep.
They're
tabs
it's
every day.
killing his brain cells.
Well, I think he was making like tea with it or something.
He was, I'm sure
Every
he
way
was trying all
possible.
kinds of methods with it, but basically it led to him to have a mental breakdown and he wasn't really fit for performing, so they ended up canceling the shows.
Just in the U.S. though.
Just in the U.S. Now, some of the shows Barrett would play just fine. You know, no problem at all. He was there. But the majority of the shows at this time period, he was very spacey. He would be playing guitar. He'd just kind of be staring off into the ceiling, not really there. Sometimes they even said that he would play with his back facing the crowd, and he would just be playing like the same note over and over again, just down, down,
Just
down,
off into
down.
space.
Yeah, just not there. So
Could you
obviously-
imagine being back in the day and
Dude.
like being at a Pink Floyd concert and seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they didn't really know what to expect. So
Yeah.
Look,
yeah, because this is a kind of an upcoming band, and maybe it's just that's how they do it.
Maybe they were like, "Oh, it's new. It's
Well, obviously that happening, the band was embarrassed. Like that's not how they envision performing. That's not how they want to do it. They're embarrassed. So the idea was that they brought this other guitarist in. This guitarist's name is David Gilmour.
Ooh.
Yes, spicy.
Come on, man.
All right. So David Gilmour was brought to the band, and basically the whole idea of bringing him onto the band was he would perform for the band live and show, and then Barrett would still be behind the scenes
Be the
helping write
studio,
music, and
yeah.
he'd be the studio player. Okay, so that was their idea.
and then David picked up his guitar.
Well, it's funny because David was actually a lifetime friend of Barrett's. Barrett knew David.
So
growing up.
Barrett was okay with it.
Yeah. Barrett
sure it was all-
Barrett was in agreement with this. He was all cool for everything. Well, in 1968, Barrett is clearly depressed at this point. He is not the same person he was. He barely talks. He doesn't eat well.
Loosely
You
hanging
know,
on mentally.
Yeah, he's not really there when they're at recording sessions and stuff like that. Like he's kind of hanging on by a thread.
Do you think any of that had to do with him not being able to play live?
I think there was a lot that went into it. That definitely probably
Yeah,
played a
I think,
factor.
Kind
yeah.
of
You know?
hurt his self-esteem a bit.
Probably.
You know,
I'm
he's
sure.
a musician and he can't do
I'm
his
sure.
craft.
Can't do it, yeah.
I'm sure his mental state wasn't right because of all the drugs he was taking
I
and
mean,
everything.
imagine if you couldn't sing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If you lost your voice or something.
Yeah, especially
Don't put that juju on me.
Let's think. I mean, Barrett was the guy that kind of created the sound that they started
Yeah, I mean,
experimenting
he's
with.
still-
right?
Created the Pink Floyd sound
He
at
did.
that time.
He did, and he kind of created the name for Pink Floyd as well. Well, anyway, so he's very depressed at this point, and the band realized that, you know, this isn't really working, and they're going to kind of have to figure something out. So then their next plan for him was, okay, now he just helps us with the songwriting, and he helps us with the lyrics and stuff like
They're
that.
basically, because they're all friends, they're trying to have him do something in the
Exactly.
band.
Exactly. They were trying their best to keep him on the band
Yeah.
because that's his band too.
Exactly.
You know, they're not gonna they ain't gonna diss their homie like that. That's their homie.
Not just going to kick him out without trying to get him help or anything.
Well,
Metallica.
Oh, wow.
so eventually, by April of '68, Barrett quietly agreed to leave the band. You know, they all kind of brought it up. It's like, we think it's best if you leave. He agreed with them. He's like, you're right. It's time for me to go. And thus, the era of Sid Barrett was over for Pink Floyd. He was in the music industry for about 4 years, and then seemingly lived the rest of his life in obscurity.
Just disappeared
So-
off into
Yeah, he shaved his head completely off, all of his hair.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
nobody
years-
knew who he was.
Years
and-
later, he came back
yeah.
and just
Yeah.
showed up randomly at a recording studio where they were at, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I actually have that in here. We'll get to that for sure. I'll bring that up. But a lot of people actually say that him doing so, living his life in obscurity and kind of like behind a rock, almost made him even more legendary in a way, just because he kind of came in, started this music scene, and then just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very mysterious character, you know.
Definitely.
Only imagine what's going through his head. So this brings us to our next era of the band's life. This is considered the Roger Waters era. So they ended up hiring a new band manager. This man's name was Steve O'Rourke, and EMI ended up releasing their second studio album, A Saucer Full of Secrets, on June 29th, 1968. Okay, so now we are on album 2.
Yeah, it was 2
Pink
years
Floyd.
apart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's album number 2. Their song, Let There Be More Light, reached number 9 on UK's top charts. So this was like their first big
That's
hit.
big, yeah.
Mhm. So number 9, that's pretty good for all of
10.
UK's music.
For their second album.
Second album, one of their
Second
songs
album,
hits top 10.
That's
That's pretty good.
that's legendary right
now,
there.
the sound that came from this album, this actually created a new subgenre in music. And this subgenre was called space rock. which I think's a really cool subgenre. So you think of space rock, you think of like this
Throw up the
this long adventure and this empty void in
Yeah.
space. You know, all their sounds. You know,
All the synth stuff happening, all the
yeah.
analog synths.
well, so they
Analogs.
they weren't really working with synths just yet.
Really?
Not yet.
How were they getting the sound?
It was mainly
pedals?
mainly pedals and volume.
it was
and
David
equalizers.
Gilmour with a mic going, wow, wow,
It was not that.
It
wow,
was
wow, wow.
definitely not that.
It was not
And
that.
then someone over there on the mixer going, wow, 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 wow.
You're thinking of Tom Morello.
Oh, that's
No, he uses a whammy for that.
Anyway, back to this. So they ended up actually their first time on tour in the States. Do you guys know who they toured with?
White Snake.
Nope.
Okay,
White Snake?
No.
What?
sorry.
It's a huge band.
Huge band?
Huge band.
The Zepp?
No.
No.
Good guess though.
Beatles?
It was the Who.
Who?
The Who.
Who?
Yes.
You s-
The Who.
the Who? Yeah, okay.
They're a very, very well-known band. So now we're into early 1969, and the band begins recording their third studio album. They didn't really take any time off. Like they released an album,
And then got back to work.
and
you
then
know,
they got
tour.
right back to work.
baby.
They weren't really touring just yet.
Yes, they were doing
They
shows.
did the tour in the States,
Yeah.
right? And they toured with their second album
Yeah,
and stuff. Probably played a little bit from the first, but
they're probably like trying to basically do that American tour to produce that second album and then go back to their town, spend 6 weeks making another album, and then going back out on tour to produce that one.
yep.
Life
Or to
on the
promote
road,
that
baby.
one.
So by this time, they actually started recording at Abbey Road Studios.
Sounds familiar.
Does sound familiar. Another band that recorded there? Do you know?
The Roaches? I mean the Beatles.
Very good, Zach. You've done very well. Gold star for you, buddy.
The Roaches.
Gold star for you. So they recorded their third studio album, which was also their first soundtrack album for the film More, and the title of this album is called More.
The film
a soundtrack-
Spider-Man 1.
Soundtrack album, for those that don't know, is an album that is made specifically for a film or a movie. So modern days instances, you can think of like Kendrick Lamar making his album for the Black Panther film that came out several years ago. That's a good example.
They did More on a tour, right?
Say what?
They did the studio album More on a tour as well, right?
Yeah, they toured it was very briefly.
They did more on a tour.
Yeah, it was very briefly this tour. It was only like 8 weeks.
I overheard something about that tour though.
What?
They did something that like changed music forever in that tour, to where they had this device or whatever, and the keyboardist, what's his name again?
That's right.
Yeah,
Richard Wright.
Yeah, Richard Wright. So he had this thing to where he had like a toggle switch, like kind of on like a controller, but if it was just in the center, then the sound was centered into the room.
Okay.
But if he messed with it and put it diagonally and like went left and right diagonally, it would basically like swirl his keyboard around the venue. And
The sound.
yeah, the sound. Yeah, so the sound would be like going around you. And in one of their songs, in More, I believe, they have like footsteps and marching. And what he did is he did that diagonal stuff live, but when he did it, it basically sounded like people were walking or marching around you, and he would do that with his keyboard, which is really
crazy.
cool.
That was groundbreaking.
Oh yeah,
Like no one.
Pink Floyd also did the first like surround sound concert. Yeah, May 12th, 1967, I believe.
Just revolutionist.
In like the
man.
Queen's Hall, they had like 4 speakers. 2 speakers were up, and then they had speakers in the back.
Changing music forever.
Yeah, so
No, for real. So later that same year, they ended up releasing their fourth studio album. That one was titled Ummagumma.
I'm sorry.
Ummagumma.
Ummagumma.
Okay.
So in 1969, that's when Harvest Records released that album. That was November 7th of 1969.
Also, the year we went to the moon.
Yes, indeed. So most of 1970, the band worked on their fifth album, which was labeled or titled Atom Heart Mother. which was released by Harvest Records on October 2nd, 1970. The last album that Norman Smith would actually help on, so that original producer that they had,
Yeah.
that was the last album he ended up helping on.
Real quick, do you think they created the subgenre of space rock at that time because of the whole space race going on?
You could argue that,
You
for
know,
sure.
It could be.
You know, in the 60s, that was when, we were all trying to get to the moon.
I
Shout
think
out
that's
America.
when we really started finding out things about space
And so everybody...
and stuff. So I
Yeah.
think that was a big
The
impact
mysticism of
point
it.
for
That's back
everybody.
when like movies were coming out, and it was
Yeah.
all about space and trying to get
like what was it, 2001: Space Odyssey?
yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. That was just a big play into that, and it kind of just seemingly seemed like their music fit that, So, well, then the band started working closely to a man named Ron Geeson and a conductor named John Aldis, who he actually introduced a choir.
So they went from a producer
album.
to a conductor because they were just making
They were-
moves.
Wait, they were doing an
composing.
album?
Yeah, they were
doing
making
an album-
moves.
They were doing an album on a train?
No, Zach. The band didn't like the album that they ended up making, but it actually became number 1 on the official charts album. So like basically the UK list, it became this album that they did not like ended up becoming number 1 on
Wow.
this list,
Bubblegum pop bull.
which is kind of ironic.
that is pretty ironic.
So by 1971, the band is finally starting to make a profit off their music. So this is 8 years after the band was formed. They're finally starting to actually make a profit off of their music.
It takes time.
Mm-hmm. So Rogers, Roger Waters ended up taking control of their music. Basically, he took control of their sound and their lyrics. Gilmore contributed just as much as far as like the overall songwriting.
They actually
and stuff goes.
feuded a lot, didn't they?
Not at the beginning.
Not at the beginning.
Not at the beginning. They were pretty cool. They were all meshed out.
Smoking the
But
devil's
this is when they started doing a lot more experimental methods and stuff like that. So they ended up releasing their 6th studio album, which is labeled Meddle, Meddle.
Oh, I was about to say.
Yeah, no. So that was released October 30th, 1971. It did well in the UK, but it did not do very well in the US. It got very bad reviews in the US.
I mean, the 1970s in the U.S. is when like rock and metal started to make.
Well, when did
debut.
Black Sabbath came out in the early 70s too, didn't they?
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
So that was like what people were listening to in the United States.
So the band kind of took that one on the chin, and then they're like, all right, let's get back into it and start doing it again. So they started working on their 7th studio album, Obscured by Clouds, which was released June 2nd of 1972. Again, this album did not get very good reviews from the UK or from the States. It was kind of one of their
flop.
worst albums, honestly.
It was a
if I'm
flop
being
album.
honest.
What was it called again?
Obscured by Clouds.
Yeah, it sounds like their music vision was obscured
You
by
could say
clouds.
that. So this is when they went beast mode, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, from May 1972 to January 1973, the band continued writing songs in the Abbey Road studios. This is where they started experimenting with synthesizers and vocal harmonization. Okay, it's where 2 people are singing at the same time for
Same note.
anybody that doesn't know. Now, on March 1st, 1973, Harvest and Capitol Records released the 8th studio album, The Dark Side of the Moon. Now,
That is
I'm
the
sure-
album that everybody knows.
I'm sure you've heard of that album. It's
Of
actually
course,
right
it's
here
right
in front of
there.
us.
You've seen it with any college girl on their T-shirt, and they probably couldn't name a single song off of it. But yeah, everyone's heard of this album one way or another.
Have
So-
you guys seen the like? So there's a magnet that like people sell, and it's all of these naked girls, but they have the dark side of the moon like painted on them.
Oh yeah, I
But they're-
have a picture
America
up
has
in my
a-
room.
Yeah,
It
you have a
has-
picture
It
of that
has
in
all
your
their huge albums.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's one of
they're
them.
bunch of
huge
naked
albums.
ladies.
They're huge
Yep.
albums.
No, Pink Floyd, Zach. Come on, get your mind out of the gutter.
Anyways,
Stupid.
so real quick before we dive into the history of Dark Side of the Moon, there's also a little conspiracy about this album. Have you guys heard of this?
No.
No, what's up?
Little weird story surrounding it. So I'm sure you've heard of The Wizard of Oz, right? The original 1939, I think 1939. The original, the OG Wizard of Oz.
Yeah,
It
of course.
it's a cult classic, I guess. I don't know. honestly never seen it. But so if you play the movie and the album start to finish at the same time, the album lines up exactly with the movie. You know, even to a point where they say, "Why are you running?" and it's, you know, Dorothy is running or something like that.
Wow.
And it's
Interesting.
weird story. I actually saw an interview with Joe Rogan and Roger Waters, and Joe Rogan actually asked him about it, and he said, "Quote Roger Waters says bullshit." He says whatever whatever it was a coincidence, whatever. But he did share a story. It's kind of an urban legend where this conspiracy might have came from. And so there was a cop in Louisiana, a young guy, and he was following this big tour bus that was kind of swerving all over the roads a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so he pulled him over, gets up to the door, opens the door, and just, smoke billowing out. Obviously they're smoking something in there. You can smell it. So he gets on. He's like, all right, where's it at? He's going through the bus, trying to bust people. No one has anything on them. Everyone's like, no, that's not me.
Wait, can I guess who it was? Please.
I'm sure you know.
I think I do.
So at the back of the bus, he gets to the little bathroom, secret compartment little area, and he opens the door, and it's none other than Willie Nelson.
I knew it.
Willie.
Willie Nelson.
And as the story goes, supposedly Willie Nelson was smoking some ganja, listening to Dark Side of the Moon, and watching Wizard of Oz. and that's supposedly urban legend where it came from.
Such a Willie Nelson thing to do.
Definitely.
So back to this album. So this album is actually considered the band's masterpiece, right? This ended up being their best-selling album.
Yeah, it's the one everybody knows.
This album sold more than 20 million copies. I'm sorry. Let me actually recalculate that. 46 million copies.
Oh, wow.
A little
Yes,
bit more.
that's a big
It's
number.
a little bit more, yeah.
So, a cool fact about this album, this held the #1 spot on the Billboard 200 charts only for a week, but it stayed on the charts for 736 weeks, all the way up until 1988.
It's about 14, 15 years.
It's 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. So obviously, like I said, this became their most successful album by far. To be able to recreate this album live, they actually added a saxophonist. His name was Dick Perry. And they also brought in female vocalists as backing vocals.
I've seen some
to their
live
live
performance,
tracks.
not in person, but some videos of live performances, and that saxophone just hits.
Yeah, I've heard of Dick Perry before.
Just hits different.
So after their touring for that album went well and everything, because it did do well, this album actually finally brought great wealth and notoriety to the band.
Well,
So now they had
46
some
million
money,
copies.
right? So now they had some money, and they went back to Abbey Road and began writing. The first song that was written when they returned to Abbey Road after touring for this album is called "Shine On, You Crazy Diamond," which is one of my personal favorite songs from them. But this is actually a tribute song to the old band member Syd Barrett. This Roger wrote this song as a tribute to Syd Barrett.
Fun fact: David Gilmour actually came across that opening riff sort of by accident. He was like a fret off what he was thinking he was on, and he played like an A minor suspended or something, whatever it is, and he was like, "Wait a minute,
That's
hold up,
Yeah.
hold up, wait a minute."
It sounds really cool. So then they went on to continue to record what would be their 9th studio album, which is "Wish You Were Here," which actually it got mixed reviews at the beginning from critics. Some people were like, "This is awful." Other people were, "This is it," But this inevitably was actually Wright and Gilmour's favorite album that they ever made. This album sold more than 20 million copies, and allowed the band to buy these church halls back in the UK, and they actually converted them into recording studios.
That reminds me,
Church halls into recording studios?
tall ceilings, good reverb.
That's true, yeah.
It kind of reminds me of a story that I heard about them. If the viewers, if you're familiar with the films Monty Python, any of that, or, way back in the day, cult classic. When they were first starting up their filming production, they didn't have enough funding, and no one would give them any funding, and they were taxed just out the wazoo back then, like 90% income tax. So they could never
Wow.
get it was ridiculous. So they couldn't get the funding to start production, so they were looking to these rock bands that were coming up in, London around the time, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, Pink Floyd, and it was actually Pink Floyd who gave the production companies first like startup cost of like 200 British pounds, and that's kind of what got Monty Python started. So if you like those movies, go ahead and give it a little shout out to Pink Floyd.
Very cool.
That is cool.
Very cool. So they actually used these church halls to start recording for their 10th studio album, which is called Animals.
That's
Animals
that's
was
the
released.
controversial one, isn't it?
Animals was released by Harvest and Columbia Records on January 23rd of 1977.
If I'm not mistaken, that was heavily influenced by George Orwell's Animal Farm, right?
It was, but another big influence that came, well, I wouldn't really say influence, I would actually say there was a lot of complications in creating this album. This is when all the arguing started. This is when
the feud between Gilmore and
That
and
album
Waters.
was like made because they wanted to say like F the man, like
Yeah,
pretty
pretty
much,
they
right?
were
Yeah.
against
Yeah.
the whole capitalistic totalitarian rule of corporate America, corporate UK, whatever.
Yeah, essentially. So, what they would fight about is
Stick it to
they
the
would
man-itis.
fight. They fight over money. They would fight over royalties. They started fighting about lyrics that they were writing for the songs. They didn't really agree with each other's lyrics or see that it was Pink Floyd's sound.
It's
per
the
se.
money, man. It starts getting to you, and
Money,
money
the root of
changes
all
people.
evil, man. So then Waters, he actually ended up spending most of 1978 writing The Wall, which was
A great album.
which ended up being
Oh, yeah,
produced.
The Wall's a great album.
Fantastic album. Ended up being produced by Bob Ezrin. So they actually began recording in December of '78. After he had spent pretty much all year writing this album, which he didn't write the entire thing. Gilmore had a little bit of writing in there as well.
Yeah.
But Waters did write most of that album. Now the whole ensemble with The Wall was being they're stuck. They're at a wall in their career that they need to get over because they're starting to get all these problems, complications of money, royalty, all this drama that's now being incorporated into their lives because they can't agree on things.
yeah,
They consider they're stuck at this point. So that's kind of why
it's
the
a cool
name,
concept for an
That's-
album.
That's why they came up with the name The Wall. And The Wall actually produced a film called Pink Floyd The Wall.
Speaking of films they produced, I don't know if it was before this or during this, but or like during this era or whatever, but they filmed a live concert film at Pompeii. Mm-hmm. Was this before or after that?
That was after.
The original filming of it, like the first time they went before they had that concert.
Yes.
Okay, then we can cover that.
Yeah, that was after this.
I couldn't remember the date that happened.
So the Wall was released on November 30th of 1979. The band actually admitted that they rushed that album. They didn't really do it how they wanted. They kind of rushed it just to get it out because they were kind of struggling financially, actually. But The Wall became the band's second most popular album with over 30 million copies sold.
That's so crazy. that They rushed an album and it becomes the
another
second
check-in.
favorite.
Yeah, and that film that I was
Another
talking
check
about,
in the bank.
they actually helped with the director Alan Parker to help create this movie based on their album, because the album actually had an entire story that was evolved around it, and they basically created this like animated film
think I have
that
that
portrayed
movie,
the story. We do have that movie.
Yeah, I think we have that movie.
Yeah, so that was just really interesting. They're making albums into movies, basically. They're making the albums come to life on screen, which is kind of cool.
That is pretty cool.
So, and the movie released, by the way, the movie was released in 1982, and it actually got a lot of positive feedback. Did very well. So they're starting to fight a lot more, okay? And they decided, well, I wouldn't say they, Roger Waters decided that he was going to take matters into his own hands and write their next album all by himself. So this album was actually called The Final Cut, which is kind of appropriate for the album title because this is actually the last material that Waters contributes to for the band.
So he basically, this was his goodbye album to.
This was his goodbye album.
That is
His
crazy.
farewell F you guys.
So this was the last album to feature Waters, but it was also considered their worst performing album since Obscured by Clouds.
Do you think?
It was because he wrote the whole thing.
Do you
They
think
didn't
it-
have any. They didn't have anything to do with it, pretty much.
Do you
so.
think it was that, or do you think maybe like David Gilmour or some of the other guys held some resentment, so they just didn't? They're just like, nah, I'm not going to put
Held
in.
back?
Yeah.
Or do you think maybe
I don't think we'll ever know.
he did it on purpose?
Maybe he did do it on purpose. He probably felt some sort of,
Or yeah,
you know,
on his exit out, he's like, let me
resentment.
put them in the dirt and then dip out.
Yeah, it could have been.
So they ended up having a
No
dinner.
shade.
They ended up having a dinner with the band's manager to discuss the future for the band.
What'd they eat?
I don't know, Zach. I don't know what they ate.
Steak.
But basically, Gilmore and Mason, they ended up leaving the dinner, saying that, you know, this band has a future still, or whatever. So they left. But then Waters kind of left the dinner saying, I don't think this band has a future. So
Wow.
So after that night, a couple months goes by, Waters officially leaves the band. Roger Waters is no longer into Pink Floyd. The Pink Floyd.
He doesn't like Pink Floyd anymore.
So, by the way, important detail I did leave out earlier. This was before their Wish You Were Here album, or it was right after the Wish You Were Here album. Richard Wright was actually dealing with personal problems, so he wasn't showing up to rehearsals and stuff like that, or like recordings. And it became such a problem that the band actually decided to kick him out
Oh wow.
of the band. They kicked him out, but they kept him on as a salary-paid studio recorder. So he was there specifically to record in studio with them, and that was it. However, he did perform a couple live shows with them, but technically he was not in Pink Floyd.
I mean, that's gotta
Sting a
sting.
little
that's
bit.
gotta
sting,
sting.
bro.
Yeah.
So, but hear me out. There's a lighter end. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Gilmore, Mason, and Wright, who was brought back onto the band after Waters left, they brought him back on to the keys, and they moved forward and they tried to create a new album. So they started recording, which was a result of their 13th studio album, and this is called A Momentary Lapse of Reason. This was released on September 7th of 1987.
But that's a pretty good title for an album too.
Aptly named.
I think so, too.
They seem like when they were writing their albums, like the titles of their albums, they wrote it as like things they were dealing with
What
as
they're
a
going
band,
through in
pretty
life.
much.
It related to them.
So Pink Floyd was known for their like really like cool stage sets and stuff like that. Well, this album, they only did an 11-week tour, but this tour, they actually had like just a crazy effects on stage. This was like where they really stepped up their game with their effects that they do on stage and stuff like that. Lasers, lights, all other kinds of stuff. So that was this album that promoted that.
Pyro and stuff like that.
Stuff like that. So the band was focusing more on solo work, being like David, like they were all kind of doing their own thing, so they weren't really writing a whole lot for Pink Floyd, because they were being successful as solo acts as well. Every now and then they'd play a show here and there. Well, then they teamed up again in 93 and began working on a new album. So by March 28th, 1994, they released their 14th studio album, which is titled The Division Bell. This album had mixed reviews and had 0 hit songs on the radio,
Yikes.
Oh no.
but still sold over 7 million copies.
I mean, their name holds some weight.
It does. The
Of
name
course,
alone.
yeah.
So after that, the only little bit of work they did left, on September 19th, 95, the band released an EP, and it's called London 66-67. So this is a lot of material from the early days when they kind of first started.
That's back when like EPs were starting to be big, and instead of releasing a full 14-song album, you would release like 6-7 songs just to get it out and call it a EP.
EP. Yeah, and this material came from the early days, recording through 66 and 67, hence the name. After this, the band was pretty much done. They kind of had it with each other.
I mean, you're spending that much time of your life with
That's a
with
long
the
time,
same
man.
people, you know?
They've been in this band for over 30 years now at this
There's
point.
Yeah.
not many bands who can go that long ride like
Right.
Metallica
That's a long
or-
time,
That
yeah.
is a long time, man, but it paid off. because on January 17th of 1996, Pink Floyd was inducted into the United States Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That's gotta feel good.
The year before that, they won a Grammy too in 1995 for, I want to say, the best live musical performance, and it was for Marooned.
Now, unfortunately, at this ceremony when they were inducted into the Hall of Fame, the only people that were in attendance at this ceremony was Nick Mason, David Gilmour, and Richard Wright. Roger Waters did not come to the ceremony.
Yeah, he was done.
He was done, but they wanted him to come, but he didn't come because they were like, "Dude, you're part of this band." So
He
that was
came
that.
back for that. Yeah. I mean,
After that, so years later, Waters ended up returning because they did a tribute concert. This tribute concert was done at it's called the Hyde Park Show, which was apparently a very big show back in the late 90s.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
So this show brought a lot more attention back to Pink Floyd, and they were actually offered to do one last tour. They were offered £136 million to do one last tour.
it's a lot of weight.
And
That is a lot of weight.
and they turned it down. They said no.
It wasn't enough weight, I guess.
I just think they didn't want to involve money again
That probably,
to that extremity.
And at that point, like, they all have their own lives. They've all not forgotten about it, but they've all moved on.
So that was, after that concert, that was pretty much it for Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd was kind of dormant for years. It wasn't until 2007 when they got back together and performed a tribute concert for the late Syd Barrett, who had passed away the year before due to pancreatic cancer.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace, Syd Barrett. Now, unfortunately, following that, 2 years later, so this isn't, 2 years after Barrett passed away, so this is 2008, Richard Wright, the keyboard, passed away of lung cancer.
Not the keyboard, but the keyboard player.
The pianist. He passed away of lung cancer.
No,
grow up, gentlemen. Grow up. So after all that happened, the last two remaining members in this band is Nick Mason and David Gilmour. So they decided in 2013 they started working on what would be the band's 15th studio album, which was called The Endless River.
That sounds about right.
This album, so all their albums were released by Harvest and EMI Columbia or Capitol Records. This particular album was actually released by Parlophone Records, and this was released on November 7th of 2014. This would be Pink Floyd's final album that they did. Okay, so this band ended up having...
I didn't even know they released an album in 2014.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people do. It did not get the recognition by any means. I mean, I personally don't really remember too much off of it. I couldn't really name you a song right now off of it.
I mean, you only have two members.
You know,
what are you gonna do? You're gonna hire out the rest of them.
Yeah.
So real quick, we focused a lot on the history, but we haven't really, given our personal accounts of Pink Floyd. When did you guys first get exposed to them? What was your first memorable experience with a Pink Floyd song?
I'd say that I can consciously remember. It would have to be, this was actually about 5-6 years ago, when I really became close friends with my buddy Heath. My man loved music. This man loved music and loved all kinds of music. So Absolutely. He actually kind of opened me up to more styles of music that I like now. But one in particular was Pink Floyd. And I hadn't really heard too much about them, beforehand. I'm only like 17, 18 years old at this point.
Yeah.
And he introduces me to a song called Hey You.
Great song.
This is off.
That is a good song.
This song is off of pretty sure it's off Dark Side of the Moon. It might actually be off The Wall.
I think it is.
I think it is The Wall. Yeah.
It's The Wall.
Fact check.
Fact check.
Give me a second.
Find that out for me.
I got you. Give me a second.
It's one of those two. But anyway, it was just something that, like, if we were coming home from, like, our flag football game that we did pick up, like, intramural flag football. And just
It's
driving
the
home.
wall.
It's the wall.
It's the wall.
Coming through, maybe driving through the drive-through of Whataburger. Yeah, we'd be blasting "Hey You," singing it at the top of our lungs. You got it.
Give me my Whataburger. You're taking
So
too long.
I owe my credit and knowledge of, like, loving Pink Floyd and being a Pink Floyd fan to my late friend Heath. My boy, rest in peace.
Respect. I remember.
Love that dog.
He was a great man.
That's my dog right there.
Hey You and Jimi Hendrix. What's the song of Jimi Hendrix? It's so well known. They sound pretty similar.
Hey You and a Jimi Hendrix song sound really similar?
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
We'd have to look that up.
You'd have to give us some insight on that one.
It's the
So while you check that out, so my first experience with Pink Floyd, I found them out, but I didn't really like reconnect with them until I was much older. But I'll never
Hey
forget
Joe.
Hey Joe.
Hey You and Hey Joe sound
this. Hey
super.
No,
Joe.
it does not.
But anyways, so my sister actually had this boyfriend at the time, and he was one of those guys that had like the 212s in the back of his car, you know, big subs, you know, like
Bumping Pink Floyd.
he listened to all types of music. That's who I learned Tool from, Widespread Panic, Pink Floyd, just a wide array of music, among other, you know, rap and R&B stuff, you know, Bone Thugs and all that stuff. But I remember this one time, and it happened with Schism by Tool too. Like that's why I remember this. But I was a little kid. I was probably 5, 6 years old, sitting in the back seat, and my dad worked a lot. So my sister, who was 10 years older than me at the time, was always babysitting me. So I was always with her, and we were riding around in the back of the car, or I was, and sitting, you know, butted up against these 212s, and he's got a 3,000 watt amp. I mean, he's got the setup, you know, and it's just blaring, and I'm trying to sleep. You know, we're out in the middle of the night. My sister's been being a degenerate, doing what they do, and I'm over here leaning up against the window, and it's just brrr, you know, and it was God, it was Time, you know, and it was like the whole intro to Time, the clocks and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
I like it. Just, it's not a bass song, but damn it, he made it a bass song.
Turn that bass all the way up to 100.
Really spoke to you.
And
It spoke to you.
it entered me.
Wow.
Oh.
I felt every ins and outs of that song, highs and lows, and like I said, it wasn't until 10, 15 years later, whenever I was in my 18, 19, 20, something like that, where I started remembering that moment. You know, I came across Time again, and I was like, I remember this. I was like, it was childhood trauma in a good way, kind of, you know, you're exposed to these iconic bands, but you don't know what they are. And then it's cool to kind of, you get a little memory of it. And it's like, no, I have heard this.
Yeah. I was about 14, and I was really getting heavy into guitar, especially acoustic guitar. And like, I had heard Dark Side of the Moon, and I was like, I want to learn how to play this. And so that
started it.
Yeah, that started it. Yeah, I learned.
I mean, no, that's.
I learned how to play
short and sweet.
I learned how to play Dark Side of the Moon,
Very
and
cool.
then listened to some stuff off The Wall, and listened to some stuff off of the Dark Side of the Moon. Obviously, I wouldn't say I'm a huge Pink Floyd. Like, I don't know a lot of their songs, but like,
Sure.
I definitely got into them when I was learning guitar, and was like, yo, these guitar parts are like really, really cool.
Especially their mainstream stuff. What's you guys' favorite Pink Floyd song?
My personal favorite is "Comfortably Numb."
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say "Comfortably Numb" or like "Wish You Were Here." Like the guitar solo in "Comfortably Numb" is just enchanting.
It really is.
I would say Wish You Were Here.
That's a great song.
They're all good bops.
It's good, man. So, guys, a recap, just real quick on Pink Floyd. So, Pink Floyd remains to be one of the most popular and influential rock bands ever to do it. They had over 250 million records sold worldwide.
Wow.
That is a
These
lot.
guys,
That's a lot of records.
These guys started out very modest, group. They were mostly doing just R&B and covers,
Just a little
and all that stuff. They were literally the T set.
A little tea set.
But this band ended so epically as a band, just responsible for the future of what music is today.
A household
in my
name,
opinion.
pretty much.
I mean, they
Yeah.
they created so many new,
So mainstream.
just achievements in the music industry, and came up with new sounds, subgenres, stuff like this.
very humble guys
They were, man. They were cool dudes.
for the most
and
part.
I would have loved to see them live. That
Oh,
would've been
yeah.
insane. It'd been insane, but that pretty much does it.
I actually have a quote from David Gilmour
Here.
that was in a somewhat recent interview in the past few years, kind of talking about the end of Pink Floyd era, you know, and it goes, "I think we have successfully commandeered the best of what there is. I suspect this is it." And that was in response to the interviewer asking him, is Pink Floyd ever gonna get back together? Are they gonna come back for a 16th album? And I don't know. It's bittersweet.
Yeah.
It is.
They didn't, I mean, they're not entirely done, so they're actually doing, once the war in Ukraine started, between Russia and Ukraine, they actually started a humanitarian relief effort
Really?
by writing songs
Really?
for that, yes. And all the songs are in Ukrainian. They've got a Ukrainian singer on to sing the songs, so it's
Wow.
all in.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
That
I
is
didn't know this
cool.
either.
No, it's
And-
super cool. They're still doing that now.
And it's
Wow.
obviously to raise money for it.
Mhm.
So is it like a donation based thing? So yeah, well,
That's awesome.
Go check that out, guys. Definitely, I didn't realize that was a thing. And thank you for bringing that
Yeah,
to our
yeah.
attention.
I mean, another reason to love Pink Floyd. I know not everybody is the biggest fan of Pink Floyd, but for what they did for
music in general,
I mean, I appreciate them.
for what they're doing for Ukraine.
Definitely, yeah.
Go check that out. And if you're feeling generous, throw them a couple bucks. People in Ukraine could definitely use it right now.
That's about it. I mean, do you guys have any last final things to say before we close off here?
I think I'm good.
Other than this was our first band breakdown. I want you guys to get in the comments. Let us know what you think. Maybe throw some suggestions in. What kind of bands do you want to hear? Some more tidbits, information, their whole discography, their whole history.
And if you want us to go through songs and try to do
Yeah.
a lyric breakdown
Maybe,
or
yeah.
something like that, let us know in the comments.
Break down some specific musicians' rigs. We can run through how they achieve those iconic tones. Maybe like a little Dimebag Darrell little clinic or something.
Mm.
So we definitely want to cater to what you guys want, and the only way we can do that is just get in the comments, let us know, and I'd love to cover anything. Honestly, it doesn't have to be specifically music related, but somewhere along those lines, and
We're open to suggestions for sure.
yeah.
I think this was very informational.
I
I
think it was
honestly think
too.
it was a very
Yeah.
informational episode.
I
So,
think it was too.
I learned a lot.
The history of Pink Floyd.
Yeah, definitely.
If you haven't heard of Pink Floyd before, and this is your first time being exposed to them, go check them out. Come back, get in the comments, and say, hey, you know what? Hey You is a really good song.
For sure. Awesome. Well, that's pretty much going to do it from here at High Road Podcast, guys. My name is Merrick,
I'm Zach.
I'm Colton.
and this is us signing off. So thank you, and we will see you guys next week.
Go smash that like button, smash the notification bell, and see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.